Hello all. What you are going to learn in this video is how to prepare your suspect cast scans for preparation of making overlays when you are doing a bite mark comparison. Again, here's my super fancy disclaimer that I am not teaching you how to do the bite mark analysis or comparison. I am simply teaching you the Photoshop steps that we use when doing this type of analysis and or comparison. So not teaching the actual bite mark comparison, just the Photoshop skills. Okay, now that we've gotten that out of the way, we are going to come up here to, this is our bite mark case folder, and I'm going to open that up. And what I'm interested in now is the suspect cast, because that's what we're about to work on. And I'm going to use suspect cast H, and I'm going to open that up in Photoshop. And again, we're going to sit here while it thinks about opening that up in Photoshop. And at some point it will in fact open. All right, so here we go. We've got our suspect cast scan in Photoshop. And the first thing that we want to do is we want to create a duplicate copy of our background. And the way that we do that is we right click on background, hit duplicate layer, and I'm fine with leaving it called background copy. If you want to rename it, you can. There's nothing wrong with that. But we're going to say okay. And the reason that we want a background copy is that if you completely screw something up down the road, you still have an untouched background that you can go back to and work with without having to just completely start all the way back over. So just a good habit to get into of creating a background copy as soon as you open it up in Photoshop. And because I'm really not concerned with that background at this point in time, I'm going to turn the eyeball off, which means that that layer is not visible, means I can't do anything to it. So there you have it. Okay. I do things a little bit out of order from the way that things are taught in the classes that I've had, and I'll explain why here in just a second. But the first thing that I do is actually mirror this image, or flip it, as some people would say. And the reason that I do that is because when you're doing a comparison, you have to remember that your suspect casts bite the photograph. So in order for the correct tooth to line up with the correct mark on the bite mark, we actually need this to be a mirrored image. And if you forget to mirror this image, the teeth on the cast are not going to be aligned with the correct mark on the bite mark, and you have really just screwed yourself up big time. It's a really bad error to forget to do that, and it's just going to make you not credible at all. And again, really hose you if you're doing a bite mark comparison. So that's the reason why I just do that first after I make my background copy, because that's kind of the one thing that I really can't recover from if I forget to do it. So the way that we do that is you come up here to image rotation, and you say flip canvas horizontal. Ta-da! Now things are mirrored the way we need them to be in order for the appropriate teeth to line up with the appropriate marks. Meaning, and you'll see if you watch the video where we actually get our overlays onto our bite mark photo, you'll understand why we needed to do this step. But for now, just trust me, we needed to do it. So the next thing that we want to do is we want to get our two arches in kind of their anatomical position, meaning I do not want the top teeth going this direction. I want the top teeth in my arch form up here. So we need to rotate our maxillary cast. If this were opposite, where our maxillary cast were correct orientation, but our mandibular cast wasn't, you would just simply rotate the mandibular cast instead. But it's our maxillary cast that we need to rotate. And the way that we do that is you come over here to your rectangular marquee tool. You highlight the rectangular marquee, and we're going to draw a box. around our maxillary arch. And once you've got your little marching ants around your maxillary arch, you're going to come up here to Edit, Transform, and you're going to say Rotate 180 degrees. So we do that, and lo and behold, we now have our maxillary arch going the right direction. Our mandibular arch is going the right direction because we didn't do anything to it. And then you can do Control D, and that will deselect it. Let's act like that was still there. If you still have marching ants, you can also come up to Select and click Deselect. That will also deselect anything you've got. So we have mirrored our image. We've rotated our maxilla to get the orientation of both arches correct. And then kind of the last thing that I just generally always do is we want to make sure that this background is completely solid black all the way around. There's no white smudges or anything like that happening back here because that'll make your life miserable when you start actually doing overlays. So basically we just want to make sure that this background is in fact completely black all the way around. And the way that we do that is we get our paint bucket tool, which mine is actually not, yeah, it is down here. So yours may be in a different place in your toolbar. Again, that kind of depends on your Photoshop settings, but you're looking for your paint bucket tool and you're going to make sure that's active. Now, just to show you what this is going to do, you'll notice down here in my color boxes, I actually have teal blue is the color selected. So if I were to come over here and do that, oh no, I just made my background teal blue. I don't want my background teal blue, I want it black. So the way that you make it black is you actually click on this square right here, and then you need to drag your mouse down to where now the new color is solid black. You say okay. Now I'm going to hit my background with my paint bucket again. Oh yay, now I have a black background exactly like I want. So that is getting this background ready to go. Now the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to do what's called kind of a block out, meaning we're going to kind of take away the extra information that we know is not going to show up in the bite mark. So you're going to need to have looked at your bite mark injury before you do this and have an idea of what teeth you think made marks in your bite mark. So for instance, if I'm looking at my bite mark and I don't see anything that would correspond to this first molar here on this mandibular arch, then I don't need to have my first molars even picture anymore. I can get rid of them. If you're unsure, then I would tell you to just keep it, and you can always go in and erase it later. But for the most part, we know we don't really need the palate. We know we don't really need this tongue space down here. So we're going to kind of just do some cleanup to just make a few things a little bit easier down the road. So I'm going to teach you how to do that. And I will say that once you're really familiar with what you're doing in Photoshop in terms of a bite mark comparison, you don't necessarily have to do this part because you can do everything overlay wise without doing the block out. But because I was taught this way and because this is the way it's taught in several of the classes, I want to include it in the video so that you know how to do it. So just keep in mind that this next step could be eliminated once you know what you're doing in Photoshop and know how to get what you need without having to do this. But let's act like this is the first time you've ever done this. So we're going to do our block out and we're going to duplicate our background copy. So again, right click, hit duplicate layer, and I'm going to rename this block out just to tell myself that's what I'm doing. And now the way that we're going to do this block out is you want to make sure that the block out layer is highlighted and active. Again, it's that light blue versus the gray. And we're going to come over here to underneath my pencil tool. We have a brush tool. So we're going to select our brush. We want to make sure that our color down here is black because we want it to match the background. And then what we're going to do is we're going to paint over the stuff we don't need. Well, that brush is super tiny. So up here is where you can make the brush bigger. Notice that's actually an okay size. But you can make it, that's almost my whole screen. That's too big. But for right now, since we're taking away just kind of a lot of extra information, let's make it a little bit bigger. Perfect. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to make this a little bit bigger so I can see things just a little bit easier. And you can do that one of two ways. You can use your zoom tool, and actually that is zooming out because I have it on zooming out. So here's your zoom tool. You can hit the plus, and then we want to make this bigger where I can see the whole maxillary arch. Now I've gotten it too big, so we're going to back up just a little bit. So that's one way to zoom in, and I'll show you the other way here in a minute when we're doing the bottom arch. So, okay, we've got our brush tool highlighted, we've got a bigger brush size, our brush is black. So what we're going to do now is we're going to come in here and we are just going to paint over the stuff that we don't need. Just like that. And since this tooth isn't even like fully there, I'm going to get rid of it. I do want to kind of leave that just to show that they're missing that tooth, because that could be important in the bite mark. So I'm not going to completely take that space for that second premolar away. I am going to go ahead and get rid of this first molar over here, just because, again, I don't think that it marked in our mark. And now you'll notice that my brush is really kind of really big to be getting up here close to these teeth. So I'm going to come back up here and I'm going to make my brush a little bit smaller. And now I'm just going to kind of, with a little bit more care, kind of go around a little bit closer to these teeth. Again, you're just trying to get rid of all that kind of extra noise, extra information that you're not going to need when you're making your overlays. And again, I'm trying not to get too close to those teeth. I don't want to accidentally take away part of the tooth. But just let's say I did. Let's say I'm painting along and I went, "Ooh, shoot, now I colored over that tooth." No big deal. Don't panic. Just come back up here to edit, hit undo brush tool, and look, it took that away. So that's how you fix that if you do happen to do that. Again, I'm just kind of really roughly painting out what we don't need. Okay, so that's our maxillary arch. So you saw how to zoom in and zoom out with the zoom tool. On a PC, there's a shortcut. You can hit Control and minus, and that will zoom out. And Control plus will zoom in. And so now we want to do the exact same thing to our mandibular arch. Again, I'm going to go back up to a bigger brush because I can pretty much take away all of this on the inside here and not have to worry about being real careful about it. And I'm going to go ahead and get rid of our first molars because we're going to have looked at our bite mark and we don't see anything that looks like it would have been made by a first molar. So we're going to get rid of it. And again, now we're going to shrink our brush size back down and come in here and just clean this up a little bit. How much you clean this up is completely up to you. Again, you don't necessarily have to do this real close to the teeth, real precise. You can simply just leave it at having gotten rid of the tongue space and the palate if that's about what you want to do. Or you can, you can sit here and get as close to these teeth as you want. Again, if I really wanted to start getting super careful with it, I'd make it bigger where I can see exactly what I'm doing. And I would come along and I would just follow those edges of the teeth. So that's how you do the block out. And that's pretty much what we need to do to have everything ready to start making overlays. Again, remember, the critical thing you have to remember to do is flip the image. If you do not flip the image, the teeth on the cast will not correspond to the appropriate marks on the bite mark, and you will be hosed. Hosed. So, do not forget to do that. Okay, so we've now done all that. We've got our block out. What we need to do is we need to save this file. And currently it thinks I'm still working on the picture. You can tell that by the .tiff. So what we actually need to do is we need to do File, Save As, and in our suspect cast folder, you can put it in there. I actually am going to come over here to my working file because that's where all of my Photoshop files are. And I'm going to leave it as scanned cast H, but I need to make sure that I change it to a Photoshop file. Again, that's a .psd. It's going to say Photoshop down here. What that does is that preserves all of my layers over here that I just made. It holds on to all the work that I've just done, and I can come back in and make my overlays in this same file here in a minute. So again, make sure you're saving this. Make sure you're saving it as, whatever suspect it is, and as a Photoshop file, and you save it wherever it makes sense for you to save it. Again, I keep all my Photoshop files in a working file. You may have a different organizational system, which is completely fine. Just put it somewhere that you know how to get back to it when you need it. So we're going to hit save, and you'll notice up here that is now changed to a .psd, and that's what we want. So, okay, that's the prep work for getting your suspect cast ready to make overlays.